Showtime. Welcome to the show. Welcome one and all to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland. Settle in tonight. It's cool out there. The wind's blowing right across Lake Ontario. Put your feet up. Get the tea going. Get the coffee going, or a beverage of your choice going. I've got a great show for you tonight. Tonight, a new book titled Real Wolfman, True Encounters in Modern America by our guest tonight, Linda S. Godfrey. Now, what if, folks, someone told you werewolves were real? What if they told you they actually have seen one walking on its two back legs? Now, you'd probably dismiss them as some kind of wackadoodle. But hold on a second. Before you dismiss the possibility that just such an unconventional creature exists, I had the wonderful opportunity to interview a person by the name of Jane Goodall. Now, folks, for those of you who are unaware of who Jane Goodall is, she is a British primatologist, anthropologist, UN messenger of peace, and is the world's foremost expert on chimpanzees. Yep, she indeed is a heavyweight, folks. Now, I'm going to read a quote about what she told me in that interview when I asked her if she believed in Bigfoot. Just about everywhere there is a creature, whether it's a Yeti, a Yowie, a Bigfoot, an abominable snowman, Sasquatch, or a large creature in South America. Everywhere there are stories. They all seem to describe much the same kind of creature. Very often there were two, one big black one, one smaller grayish one. The sounds they are said to make are about the same, and people have come with information, not just because they think we want to know, but just because they happen to be talking about them. So there's clearly something, whether it's a creature that's recently become extinct and made of memory, and yet, you find lots of indigenous people who have come face to face with what they believe is a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. Tonight, Real Wolfman, True Encounters in Modern America with our guest tonight, Linda S. Godfrey. Strap in and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time for question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome one and all. Welcome to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland. Tonight, folks, a new book out called Real Wolfman, True Encounters in Modern America with our guest tonight, Linda S. Godfrey. I want to welcome Linda to the show for the very first time. Thank you, Linda.
Well, thank you for having me.
This is, which actually shocked me when I saw this book. Not so much the title, that was enough too, but how thick it is, how many real encounters people have had, just like you and me, as the title says, with something out of the ordinary, something that can't be described as a human being, something that can't be described as a wolf. What happened to spark your interest in this particular subject matter?
Well, it was not the career path I would have chosen for myself. And I actually call myself the accidental werewolf chronicler because it was when I was working for a newspaper 20 years ago that, of all places, people around my own hometown of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, started saying that they were seeing something that looked like a werewolf out on this 2-mile stretch of road called Bray Road, just outside of town. And not only that, they were calling our county animal control officer and reporting it. And as a reporter, it just struck me as peculiar that if these were hoaxes or jokes, I just didn't think people would be calling the authorities about it, because they're technically committing fraud if you're committing a hoax like that. So when I started going and interviewing these people, I found to my surprise that they did not seem crazy. They did not seem like liars. Many of them were still genuinely frightened. They all described something that was very consistent, and I believed them. So I wrote the story, and it became almost an immediate national media sensation. We were on national TV, radio stations from coast to coast, and it hasn't stopped after 20 years.
Wow. And you had touched on the Bray Road incident. I want to get there right away, but I want to tell folks that's an electric story, by the way, folks. I want to tell folks who we're speaking with. We're speaking with Linda Godfrey tonight. She's written a book called Real Wolfman, True Encounters in Modern America. Easy way to get it, as always, folks, with every guest on this show. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover. That will take you to a spot where you can order it from the comfort of your own armchair. And tonight's a great night for that because, as I said, the wind's blowing and it's cooler now, much cooler than it was a few weeks ago. And the days are much shorter if you're going to want to sit in your comfy chair and read this book for sure. And these are true encounters, folks. These are folks just like you and me that might be out for a walk and all of a sudden they see this unexplainable phenomenon. Let's go there right now with the folks that saw the Bray Road incident. Now, this one scared me. I have to admit, it really scared me. Can we talk about that one a little bit?
Well, these were just ordinary people from every age and gender. There were young kids in junior high. There were elderly people driving late night from factory jobs, farmers, a young single mom who was a bartender in town. And this particular mom happened to be driving along, and this was in 1989, so it was several years earlier, and saw what looked like a werewolf to her. It had pointed ears on top of its head, long fangs, its eyes glared in the headlights, and it was kneeling like a human would do, holding a bloody chunk of what looked like roadkill in its upturned palms, which is not normal behavior for a canine. Other people saw it running or walking on its hind legs, and it would always, in every case, turn and glare at them with this just very arrogant look. They describe it as a jeer or a sneer. And the combination of the bipedal means of getting around combined with that strange sentience, this idea that the thing seemed way too intelligent for an ordinary wild animal in the field, was what really just scared people. That and the idea when it hit them that they could not identify this creature, whatever it was. And to this day, people will use the word thing. They'll say, I saw this thing, because they truly don't know what it was.
Can you describe some of the commonalities that they told you about this creature? Was there a smell, for example? Was it over 6 feet high?
Yeah, generally the height was described on its hind legs as between 5 and 7 feet tall, and which is big. They just had the biggest dog in America contest, or maybe it was the world, I'm not sure. And it was a Great Dane that when it stood up on its hind legs, it was a little bit over 7 feet tall. So that gives you an idea of how big it would have been, in its body. And that's also the size of the biggest timber wolves. It looked like a combination of a wolf and a very pointy muzzled dog in most cases, with pointed ears on top of its head. If its mouth was open, people would see fangs, large fangs, often described as having long, shaggy, dark fur covering its body. Sometimes people could see musculature on its chest area, and they were sure it wasn't a costume. It walked on its toe pads, as canines do. People would say to me things like, well, it walked or ran really easily, but its legs were bent backwards. And what they were really observing by that was that the creature was running on its toes, and what we would consider the ankle and heel area of our foot is off the ground with a canine. So where we're expecting to see a knee bending forward, they're describing what the actual anatomy of the canine leg would be, which tells me they're observing something real and something that you can't really duplicate as a human.
Were there threatening gestures made by the animal? I call it an animal. I don't know what else to call it.
Right. Well, creature is a good word.
Creature.
Or animal. I mean, it looked like an animal. We don't really still know for sure what it was. But rather than a gesture, it would be its posture, its attitude. people would feel that it was sending them sort of semi-telepathic messages, which might have just been their interpretation of its body language, but they would feel it was conveying to them, I'm here, you're there, you can't get me, I could jump on you if I wanted. If you tell anybody that you saw me, I'll come and get you, that kind of thing. So, and that, I hear that time and time again from people who've never heard of anybody ever seeing this. And it just seems to be something, and usually it's at the end of the story they'll say, you're going to think I'm crazy, but there's one more thing I have to tell you. Then they're relieved when I tell them, indeed, many other people have said the same thing.
You know, Linda, very often when people encounter a bear or something, they're jogging through the woods or walking through the woods, the bear won't attack unless perhaps it's protecting its young or something like that. So there is this sense that the bear is not going to attack, and you're pretty much safe as long as you don't make, as the human doesn't make any threatening moves towards this creature. Were there any cases where the human being had made threatening moves or gestures or something along those lines towards this creature, and the creature reacted badly, if you will?
Well, actually, in cases where humans have been chased, and those who have met it out in the open have experienced that, they don't seem to need to do anything at all except be there. And a number of people have said to me they felt that the creature was angry that they saw it, which really is a remarkable thing. I mean, how often have you heard a person say, well, I saw a bear and I felt it was angry that I saw it? You know, it's just not, it's not in the normal wildlife experience. Now,
how do they differ, the creatures differ from your average canine, your average, I'm trying to guess, I guess what I'm trying to do is build up the facts around it so that we can honestly say, okay, this is not an animal because animals don't behave like this. Did it show any problem-solving techniques, perhaps reaching for some kind of a spear or something, some kind of, I guess I'm thinking of a tool or something if it's hunting?
No, I haven't heard of it reaching for a tool. I have had people, however, report seeing it drinking at a stream by kneeling down and using its paws to bring the water up to its muzzle, which is not something that, I mean, any dog owner knows, you know, how a dog drinks.
That's right.
Another man has seen it actually reach into the bed of his pickup truck where he was picking up deer carcasses, and with its paw drag the creature, or drag the dead deer out of the truck bed, which, you know, normally a canine's instinct would be to go with its muzzle, you know, and glom onto it and then drag it out and run away on all fours. But this creature seems to be pretty acclimated to having its forelimbs free to use in other ways. Many people have also seen it carrying chunks of roadkill or deer carcass, that kind of thing. So it seems to be able to just use its forelimbs in different ways without using tools. Okay. It's the behavior and the attitude that people find so uncanny. You know, it doesn't do things that are physically impossible for a canine to do. Anybody who has seen, you know, a little circus dog show or a lot of the videos on YouTube of dogs dancing, that sort of thing, you can observe for yourself that it's not impossible for a canine to walk and run upright. But in the wild, they don't have the motivation and training to do that.
That's right.
And they can do it, you know, maybe if it's a matter of sheer survival, if their forelimbs are injured or missing. But I've never had anybody report that the forelimbs of these creatures were anything but very healthy and usable.
www.nightfrightshow.com, folks. The book is called Real Wolfman, True Encounters, and we're relaying some of them tonight with our guest, Linda S. Godfrey, who's written the book. Look at how thick this book is. These are all true encounters of people that have run into a similar type of creature, and we call it a creature because it's not really in the animal realm. It's not really in the human realm as well. So it's www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. Linda, when you were gathering all this information, how did you discern between, I use the word wackadoodles at the opening? Obviously, if you put a call out for people to tell their stories, you're going to get people that are embellishing them and maybe even making them up just to have their name thrown in a book. How did you discern as a writer, as a researcher, a reporter with your background, background as a journalist, which ones really fit into the category of being true and the ones that were kind of the wackadoodle ones, I like to call them?
Right, that's a great question, Brent, because I've gotten hundreds of reports over 20 years, and they vary greatly, and most of them are straightforward, detailed, just telling what happened, giving me as many parts of it as possible, and those are usually pretty reliable. I'll always go to the witness and interview them further if possible to try and vet their answers. And I do have to say, I'm sure there have been a few that slip by, but I think that I catch the ones that are either, over dramatic. For instance, I got one that was, I went in the graveyard and this giant wolf with muscles, just like a pro wrestler, began to chase me, and I smashed it with the wand with a crystal on it that I happened to be carrying, and his green eyeball fluid, whenever, that kind of thing.
It sounds like a great fictional account for a book somewhere, or perhaps a movie of the week, but not to be included in a factual book like this.
Right, and I also have acquainted myself with the various werewolf games that are out there, and they start throwing in, names from the werewolf games. That's another clue. There are other ways that that I won't even go into that just kind of tip me off right away. Most of the reports I get are pretty safe, and I'll tell you, the very first episode of the History Channel's Monster Quest show was based on my book, American Werewolf, Hunting the American Werewolf. They called it American Werewolf. And what they had me do was round up as many, I think I got about 7 or 8 local witnesses that were easy to reach and that agreed to have polygraph tests. And then they proceeded to administer grueling, state-of-the-art polygraph tests by an expert from Minnesota that they brought in specially. Every single eyewitness passed with flying colors.
That's phenomenal. Folks, the book is called Real Wolfman, True Encounters in Modern America. Our guest tonight, Linda Godfrey. Click on the book cover, www.nightfrightshow, as always, and order the book. You will not be disappointed. Linda, I want to continue with this line of thought. Now, we were talking about the lore, the mythology behind all of this. Now, when I was reading the book, I thought, okay, what's happening here is when the Europeans come over and start to settle the New World, quote unquote, they're bringing their folklore with them, their lore with them, but not so, because you have encounters from right around the globe, not just America. I was wondering if we could speak to a few of those, perhaps the Canadian ones if you want. Well, that's kind of America too. But, it just, when you stop and think of the skinwalkers from the Native Americans that were already here, they didn't bring that stuff with them from Europe. And Europeans didn't interject that lore into their mythology at all. And I call it mythology. There may be something more there. Can we talk to that, the global encounters, if you will? Right.
And right away, in the very beginning, back in the 1990s, I started getting letters from people, because that was a little before everybody was on email. So people were writing me and saying, my uncle told us about seeing something like this in the back country when he was in France in World War II.
Really?
I've had stories about, one woman wrote me and told me her grandfather was terrorized by one as a young person in Sicily. I've had sightings in the Virgin Islands where I don't believe wolves are native, to that area. And in areas where there aren't wolves or large feral dogs, there will be things like where hyenas or where jaguars or where, whatever the top predator animal happens to be. So it seems to be, it's a phenomenon that is not related completely and just only with canines. Large cats can get in on the process too. And I've even had people report things that look like a combination of a Doberman and a lynx, which is something that I find really confusing. But that also occurs across the country and by different witnesses who don't know one another.
We're talking about Real Wolfman tonight, www.nightfrightshow.com. Lots of time left, folks. If you're just joining us, put your feet up and relax. This is your time to relax. We're entertaining you tonight for the rest of the hour. We're talking about the possibilities of a real hybrid of a human being and a wolf actually existing in a new book that's called Real Wolfman, True Encounters in Modern America with our guest tonight, Linda Godfrey. Easy way to get the book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on the book cover. We'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book. Look at how thick it is. All true encounters. Maybe you have one too. You could probably get in touch with Linda. Well, you can get in touch with Linda through this show without question. It would be very easily for you. Now, one of the things I was reading in this also, Linda, most of them are in non-urban areas. Did you get any reports from urban areas, heavily
Sure.
populated? Can we talk about those? Because those mystified me.
Sure. Yeah. It's you would think this would just be a wilderness thing,
Bingo.
but
Yeah.
but they seem to have no problem going in populated areas. And I think that part of the reason for that is that many witnesses have seen them going very easily from 2 legs to 4. They can go back and forth. So if you see one walking around on 4 legs, you're going to say, wow, that's a really weird, huge looking dog thing, but you wouldn't say it was a werewolf or a dog man or anything like that necessarily. So I think that it enables them to just get into places without arousing a lot of suspicion. But one that really surprised me was when 3 witnesses saw one on an on-off ramp just outside of Milwaukee in the suburb of Brookfield, and they thought that it was maybe a stray dog, and they actually pulled over on the exit ramp, which you're not supposed to do, and ran. They were going to quick, grab it and put it in their car and take it to a shelter or something, and it stood up and started chasing them right back to their car. They got in, took off, and I thought, well, that's weird. But, one thing I do when I get a report of any kind is go and map it out and see what's around there. And I discovered that just the other side of the Cloverleaf was a golf course. This was December. It would have been unused and provided real nice cover. And that golf course led up to another golf course, which led up to a local river watershed and a tributary that would have taken it right out into the much less populated neighboring county.
Any speculation on why? Do you think it just got lost? Often you'll hear of a deer getting lost, especially
Right.
in the suburbs. I was in a city called Sudbury, 170,000 people, and this poor deer had gotten lost in the local mall. And of course,
Sure.
we rescued it. Do you speculate perhaps they're looking for a different food source as we're encroaching on their
Yeah.
territory? A lot of things like that?
I do think that they forage.
Mm.
Most large predators can range in the area of 30 miles in a day very easily from their original stomping grounds.
Hmm.
And I think it may have been following deer because this is an area where deer would sort of abound all around the outskirts of Milwaukee. There's all kinds of good habitat. And it could have been following something. It could have been even after dogs or, other things. Who knows what led it to that spot?
That's a very, very good answer, I feel. Do they travel in packs? Because we know dogs, wolves in general, like to travel in packs. Do they usually travel in packs, and has there been multiple sightings of multiple creatures?
Most of the sightings are of single creatures, but I do get an increasing number where people have seen 2, 3, 4, and even 5 together. I've had a sighting of what they thought was a mother with pups, which tells you there's a breeding population, which
Yeah.
is kind of scary in itself to think about. But there were 4 teens that saw actually a total of 4 of these creatures, one by itself, and then 3 at a different location in a wildlife area called Avon Bottoms on the Wisconsin-Illinois border area. And this was where they actually saw 3 of the creatures kneeling and drinking with cupped paws from a stream. And when the creatures saw them looking at them, they got up and started just wading across the stream toward them. And the 3, of course, got in their car and drove off as fast as they could. You know,
Oh,
exactly.
oh yeah, I would have been there
Exactly.
too, folks. Roll the windows up right away.
Yep.
Okay. Do you feel, I had alluded to what Jane Goodall had told me at the opening of the
Right.
show. She kind of feels that this could be the remnants of perhaps a Cro-Magnon man or something like that. Do you think this is a prehistoric animal that has been isolated enough that it survived all those years?
Well, here's the thing. There are lots of really ancient animals that were ancestors of dogs. There were even dog-bear combinations called amphicyons. But the thing is, there's no evidence that they walked upright, whereas these creatures really, they don't look really much like prehistoric animals. I've had a few people say, oh, their jaws were really large. It's often reported as having sort of a ruff on its neck that reminds people of a hyena, but otherwise, they look pretty much like modern dogs and wolves. So my position is, why do you have to look to the past when you've got modern animals that are much more consistent with their anatomy and look that way? And we have no evidence that the ancient animals walked upright. And many of them were built so it looks like it would have been harder for them to have walked upright anyway. They had much more compact, heavier looking bodies. So I really don't think that that's a likely answer.
Okay, fair enough. www.nightfrightshow.com, folks. We are talking about a new book out by our guest tonight, Linda S. Godfrey. The book is called Real Wolfman. And this is a book complete with real-life encounters, people that have given their stories over to Linda. And she's put them all in this book, along with some great explanations, I feel, as we're alluding to tonight. Now, I had touched on Sudbury before. In your book, you mention a fellow by the name of Michael Persinger, Dr. Michael Persinger. Mm-hmm. Same guy from Sudbury, just so I can continue. Any idea? He's a professor at Laurentian University?
Yes, I think so. He wrote Space-Time Transients, one of my favorite books, with Lafreniere. I think he's Dr. Ghislaine Lafreniere. Right, exactly.
I had the great opportunity, folks, because this show, as fans of this show know, when I moved to Sudbury, God knows when, 5 years ago, and I'm now in Kingston for the past 2 years, I started the show at Laurentian University, where Dr. Persinger actually has his lab set up. And he has a very unique lab, and he's a very well-reputed person in the industry. What he's trying to do is create a paranormal experience in a lab setting. And let me just explain that a little bit. He believes that certain magnetic spheres, if you will, that pull on the brain can actually manufacture inside your head a paranormal experience where you could see a UFO, where you could see a ghost, all those paranormal experiences. He's got something called the God helmet. And the God helmet, folks, is a football helmet. I've actually had it on my head, but not the experiment done, with a bunch of wires attached to it to manipulate the magnetic sphere around your head. And he's gotten mixed results. Some of the people that he's done it with have been able to see ghostly encounters. Other people, there's been no effect at all. I mention this because you mention his work in this book, and he's a solid scientist looking for answers to the unexplained. Could we speak a little bit about what his work brought to your work?
Well, what interested me about his book was that he and Dr. probably Lafreniere were trying. Lafreniere, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I was born in Montreal, folks. What can I say?
There you go. Anyway, what they were trying to do was find places on the Earth where there were geomagnetic anomalies and correlate those with incidents where people were seeing strange things. Now, I don't claim to be a scientist in any way, shape, or form, but I'll go anywhere there's a possible theory that could perhaps explain these incredible anomalies, because I'm really, just at a loss, and I try to stay very open-minded as to what might be causing them. And one thing that I have discovered is that there's a definite correlation with ancient sacred spots, with certain types of geomagnetic formations, with ancient military sites, and with freshwater areas. In fact, a lot of the sightings seem to be concentrated all around the Great Lakes states and up into Canada. So I thought, well, if you've got some kind of scientific study of this, and this is what these two people are all about, that really may lead us to some interesting understandings of whether or not these creatures are being induced in our minds, induced in our minds to see them, or whether there are certain spots where we're able to maybe look into a different time frame or speed of light or vibration of some sort that enables us to see them when we ordinarily wouldn't be able to. Or whether they're just something that's attracted to these certain areas for some reason due to their own makeup. It seems to be a promising area of study.
Very much so. And I like what you wrote in there, the fact that the different dimensions may converge and may tear a hole in each other at certain points right around the globe. And we see this time and time again. What comes to mind immediately, of course, is something like the Bermuda Triangle.
Right.
Could there be interdimensional travel? I mean, we know Bigfoot exists, and we're still trying to figure that out. Creatures that transcend mythology, and so many people have seen them in so many different places around the world and in so many different contexts. There must be something to it. We're not all lunatics. Just because the full moon's out doesn't mean we all go a little bit wackadoodle. I'm gonna make good use of that word today. Folks, if you're just joining us, lots of time left. We're just hitting the halfway point. We're talking about real Wolfmen tonight, and these are actual accounts, folks, in this book, written by our guest tonight, Linda Godfrey, of folks who have written in and given her their stories about, look at how thick this is, about seeing some kind of hybrid animal, creature, man, woman. I was going to ask you about gender too, by the way. Between the two, we've seen the Wolfman, of course. There's all kinds of lore, especially with Native Americans and First Nations folks about shape-shifting. We're going to get there as well. Easy way to order the book, as always, www.nightfrightshow.com, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. That's going to take you right to a spot where you can order this book from the comfort of your own home. You want to jump to shape-shifting right away? And I was going to say skinwalkers, pardon me. That's a different show. Skywalkers are aliens, if you will.
Named Luke.
Yeah, very good. Okay, skinwalkers. Now, this is something that has intrigued me because First Nations, I have a little bit of First Nation blood in me, and the richness of their heritage, I feel we don't bring as a Western society enough to the forefront. And I'd like to talk a little bit about this heritage of skinwalkers and shape-shifting. Could we do that? Could we go into that a little bit? Great, Linda, thanks.
And it's not like all one thing. What I've noticed, and this is something that I've researched a lot, and I've talked to various tribal elders from different nations, and what I've come away with is that there are several ways that they view this sort of upright canine. One is that, and I've heard this from various tribes, is that they'll say this was something that our ancestors knew, and it was and is actually a spirit creature that can go back and forth between the spirit worlds that we might call dimensions, very much like cutting-edge physics is telling us right now. And
string theory sounds like string theory.
Exactly. And when they're here, they're fully corporeal. They need energy. They have to go hunt deer or whatever so that they can keep their energy up. But they also say there's some ancient business. They're older than humans, and there's some reason they can't eat us, which would explain why. In 20 years, I've never had anybody be, other than one trivial scratch, required stitches. I guess it wasn't, and it was in Canada, by the way.
And I have to interject here, folks. It was a Quebecer. Can I tell you? That kind of explains a lot of things as we're going. But this is fascinating, and I'm kind of thinking that that's a good thing, that human beings have not been attacked except for that one rogue report.
Right. People will think they're going to be eaten, but then it just at the last second cuts and runs and disappears into the nearest cover, and that's time after hundreds of reports. Now, that is a different sort of thing than the skinwalker or the skin changer, as the Canadian Cree call it. The skinwalker or skin changer involves a sort of ritual magic, you might call it, or you might think of it more in terms of, say, the Tibetan idea of the tulpa or thought form that is able to go and be materialized either around the body or go out from the body and do the bidding of the owner. And oftentimes, I know the Navajo call it the Yenal thing that goes out, and it's usually materialized for sinister purposes and involves some evil practices and is considered quite scary by people. And that's a different sort of entity than the spirit dog man. So those are two right there. And then there are also more sort of a shapeshifter tradition where the status of being able to be a dog man is something that's earned by courage, and often by bringing the dog as their totem animal or the wolf as their totem animal, and then it's sort of externalized in the shape-shifting tradition. So there are actually three different sorts of traditions involving upright canines that were here, getting back to your much earlier point, that were here long before the Germans and the French brought their loup-garou and their Werewolf and all those European traditions, which when you look at those two and get right down to it, they share many of the same shaman-induced characteristics that the Native American shapeshifters do.
Yeah, there's something there, isn't there? Without question, there is something there. And you touched on something I'm very interested in, and that is telepathy, and perhaps the ability to project, if you will, to the person observing that
Right.
you are no longer the entity that they were originally observing, but now you're projecting a different persona. And I think that's something that we should examine further. I'm wondering if all human beings have that ability, and and go along those lines. Could we speak a little bit about that?
Well, there's a fascinating new field of research that shows that canines exhibit some sort of psychic ability.
Mm-hmm.
And I go into this in the book a little bit because many people have heard of Rupert Sheldrake's studies about animals that know ahead of time just when their owner leaves the building, and it can be different times of the day. When their owner leaves the building at work and starts on the journey home, the animals exhibit certain characteristics. And it seems to me that a lot of the people who tell me that the dog men are giving the messages are receiving some sort of empathic impression. And they'll all say, it wasn't in English, but I got the feeling that it was telling me this. And I also hear this from people, and I've read other people's reports with Bigfoot. And the difference between the two is that generally the dog man messages seem a lot scarier and more malign. It's like, tell anybody and I'll get you, that kind of thing. I could eat you if I wanted. And the Bigfoot is more like, stay away. This is my turf. You don't belong here. Just go away. That it's a little easier, easier going sort of message. Just in general, you'll find exceptions, between the two. But both of these creatures seem to be able to exhibit that ability to project some sort of message to people that humans then can receive. So it's a two-way sort of street.
The symbiotic relationship somehow.
It seems that way.
Yeah. What about gender? How does that play into it? Do women only see female creatures? Do men only see male creatures? Does it cross over? Is it really irrelevant at all?
Well, people have mentioned to me once in a while, usually because I often ask about that, if they noticed any, sexual characteristics, and usually they'll say, well, it was just too covered with fur, or I just saw it running away from behind, I didn't get a good look. But I have had a couple of people who definitely observed male organs on the creatures. I've never had anybody say they saw female characteristics other than this one incident in Kentucky with the pups, where they felt that it was the female with pups.
That's,
but normally people can't tell.
So again, that leaves the possibility that these things are procreating right here in our dimension, if you will. So
Right.
There's lots to examine, It's fascinating subject matter tonight, folks. It's called Real Wolfman, the book. Our guest tonight, Linda Godfrey's written it. And what it is, it's true accounts. Look at how thick this book is. True accounts of people that have seen some kind of creature, not quite a man, not quite a wolf, some kind of hybrid there in between that walks on its hind legs but does not attack human beings. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. You will be thoroughly, thoroughly entertained and educated at the same time. Let's continue on the esoteric thoughts. Any chance these things could be aliens coming down to visit us? Do they seem more earthbound than that?
Well, that, on the surface seemed like the most ridiculous option to me of all. But then I met a gentleman who contacted me who had been trained by the U.S. government in remote viewing, which is a very highly disciplined form of ESP where they're trained to go out, and it's sort of a psychic reconnaissance.
That's right.
Type of practice, if you will. And he looked at my drawing, which is sort of a forensic field sketch of what most people report this creature looks like. I call it the indigenous dogman sketch. And he used that to go out, and what he came back with was that these creatures had been left here a long time ago by some sort of spacefaring people, and that they stayed as sort of hidden, and they were more like a warrior caste, but they stayed as kind of an alien recon group that kept an eye on the human race and basically are waiting for us to, kill each other off so that they can take over the planet, was his view of it. And the thing that was really interesting was after he had gone and observed them psychically a few times, they started coming and observing him, and he felt that they had gotten into his head and absolutely refused to have anything more to do with them after that, and then it stopped.
That's wow. That's incredible. And we may not be that far off from destroying ourselves the way we go. We still shoot each other's bums off every chance we get.
Right.
Let me tell you a story about remote viewing, folks. I'm going to go back to Sudbury, Ontario, and when I was at Laurentian University, I took a course on remote viewing through Dr. Persinger, and I was a complete, I wouldn't even say a skeptic. I was in complete denial. And then what happened, I'm going to set up the experiment. We were to bring in photos and put them in envelopes so nobody could see the photos. And there was 6 girls, 6 boys in the class. And anyways, the teacher picked a photo, put it in an envelope, sealed it so nobody could see it. And we were to remote view, quote unquote, what we thought was in this particular envelope. And what remote viewing is very quickly is you just kind of project and accept the energy and the images that are coming at you. Well, I had drawn a limousine, all the girls to a one. I'm going to cut to the chase here, Reader's Digest. All the girls to a one had all drawn flowers. All the boys, for some reason, amongst other things they drew triangles. So we have this dichotomy right here. And whether you find out what the picture was, and I'll explain where the triangles came from in a second. We opened up the envelope with great trepidation, and it was a picture of one of the girls had been a bridesmaid at her friend's wedding. So, of course, they were all holding flowers and everything. In the background was the limousine. Now, the triangles. Let me explain this. We couldn't figure out, we were all looking at the picture, where the hell the triangle's coming from. And then all of a sudden we realized all the girls had the same type of dress on. And this is where boys are pigs, even in remote viewing, folks. They all had cleavage, triangles. And that's a true story. So boys are pigs, even when they're remote viewing. www.nightfrightshow. Real Wolfman, and great book. Let's talk some more about the various cases that are out there. Can we talk about this one? Really shocked me, the hide and seek dogman of Fargo, North Dakota.
That I think was the one where the girl was playing with her friends outdoors at night.
That's right.
And they were playing sort of a hide and go seek type of game, and her friends were all far off. She'd kind of gotten herself in her own little zone, and she saw something running in this, what they called the forbidden zone, where they had all agreed none of them would go. And the next thing she knew, this upright dog man was there staring at her. And she realized this was not her friends and took off running. And I think she was even too afraid to even tell them what it was that she had seen. But it was kind of chilling because, again, this is on the outskirts of a large city, and it obviously had been observing these girls and what they were doing. and sort of took the chance to single out a lone girl once she had separated herself from the others.
Any speculation why that singling out of, because I was trying to think of this, why would that wait and single out a single person? Were they trying to convey a message, as we talked about before, through telepathy?
I don't know. I don't think that she mentioned having any sort of feeling that there was a message. I could be wrong. I don't have it right, in my lap or anything to look at it. But I think that this seems to be a behavior that I've seen repeated. For instance, there are a couple of incidents, one in Ohio and one in Wisconsin, where farm families have sort of been besieged. And over time, the creature, again and again, will try and draw out one of the young people in the household by sort of pretending to steal a chicken, so the chicken's squawking and squawking, but instead of running away with it like a normal animal, a coyote, for instance, would certainly do, it will stand by the fence and just bite the chicken hard enough to make it squawk, and then move closer and closer to the person that comes out to investigate.
Yeah,
so
that's
I don't know why.
Yeah, that's why I was curious, because perhaps it senses that, I don't know, this is my own esoteric thought process right here. I was thinking perhaps it senses that this particular person it's singling out is a little bit more open, and perhaps it had a message to convey, but perhaps I'm way off track. Let me ask you another question. Do they primarily show nocturnal tendencies, as wolves do primarily? And if so, is that particularly just to stay stealthy and not be seen?
I think so. I once kind of ran through a large portion of my sightings and noted the times, and most of the sightings occur between 10:30 p.m. and 5 a.m., but there are a number that occur right in broad daylight, and a few at dusk and a few at dawn. So you're not totally safe any time of the day or night from them, evidently. One of the best sightings was by a man named Marv Kirshnick in 1981, who saw it almost a decade before the Bray Road sightings became known. So nobody knew about it at that time, and it was sort of in that area, not on Bray Road. But he was able to pull his car over. This thing was standing a little ways off the road near a kind of a fallen log, standing on its hind legs, staring back at him. And he just, stared and stared in disbelief until finally it so unnerved him when he couldn't figure out what the creature or animal was that he slid back over and drove off as fast as he could. And he made an illustration of it, and he is a talented artist. And that illustration has been shown on some of the TV shows that he's also appeared on as a witness. But he was so traumatized by that, Brent, that to this day he creates artwork about it. He's made puppets, and he's made little dioramas and ceramic jewelry like wolf prints, and tried to recreate that in his mind. To him, it's kind of his way of mastering his fear of this creature.
So he felt a distinct fear emanating from the creature, or from himself, because
from himself, right?
Yeah,
and he's an outdoorsman. He's used to snowmobiling up in Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, and spends a lot of time outdoors. And when he realized that out of all his knowledge of animals, he could not tell what this thing was, it was behaving in ways that no wolf should behave. And I hear that again over and over from people. That's when this deep fear that, I've just crossed the world into, spooky lane, and this is something that just shouldn't be. That's when the deep terror gets hold of them.
Is there a stigma surrounding people that come forward with these stories? For example, very often I'll run into folks, all the time, I shouldn't say very often, always I'll run into folks, and they'll say, I saw your TV show, blah, 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 blah. I have a ghost story. And I always tell them the same thing. Email me the ghost story, and they, I don't want people to know. Was there a stigma? Is there a stigma, or people afraid to come forward with their stories?
Sometimes, but it's less and less. The very first witnesses that came forward were made fun of, and sometimes people will tell me that they would tell their family members and be just hooted down, and so then they never told anybody again until they found me. And oftentimes people will tell me that they're just glad to talk to somebody who doesn't think they're crazy. But I always offer people the chance to remain anonymous as long as I have their contact information so my editors can verify, that I'm not just making it up somehow. And it's more and more people will say, well, there are so many other people now that have come forward that I feel okay about letting my name be known. It used to be about 50-50, and I'd say now it's maybe 70-30, something like that. So I think that it's becoming less and less. And the same with Bigfoot, too. There are so many Bigfoot sightings that people feel they're not the Lone Ranger anymore.
Yeah, very much so. And I do the UFO stories as well. And of course,
Right.
associated with UFO stories are the horrible experience some people go through with alien abductions. And
Right.
that trauma is very real for these folks. And to
Yes.
have
Oh,
somebody
yes.
make fun of them, to me, it can't be good for anything.
No.
Yeah.
No.
www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover, which is Real Wolfman. Our guest tonight, Linda S. Godfrey's penned this book. It's all stories. Look at how thick this book is. I keep coming back to that. True life encounters, folks, of people encountering some kind of hybrid between a wolf and a human being. And there's tons of them. I mean, these are not just isolated cases. These go on and on and on and on. I hope that one day, Linda, we never find these creatures. I fear for them now that people are going to try to catch them in the same sense that people are out there hunting Bigfoot and trying to capture
Right.
them. And it brings up that dilemma again. If somebody shoots this creature, are they committing murder in the sense that they've killed a human being, or have they slaughtered an animal senselessly? How do you feel about that? Do you want them to remain stealthy?
Well, I'd like to solve the mystery. I really would like to know what they are. So in that sense, it would be nice if we could figure it out. However, it's really not the same thing as Bigfoot. I don't feel that they're as close to human as Bigfoot seems to be. I think you'd be more likely to be accused of committing, an act against endangered species. I think they're much closer to being able to be identified as a wolf. And also, if you found a dead Bigfoot, you'd know what you had. You'd had a 9-foot tall, 900-pound ape that looks very human, and there's no other thing that it could be. But if
Sounds
you found
like
one
my
of these,
brother, by the way. Anyway, no, I'm kidding, Glenn. I'm kidding.
But if you found one of these things dead, you would just say, that's a dead, really big wolf or wolf hybrid. And there wouldn't be any way, to my knowledge, that you could prove otherwise. Maybe its DNA would be slightly altered, but I don't know. There's no human parts on it. The face is completely canine, including the dentition. The paws are definitely paws. They're elongated slightly. But that's something that could occur naturally, and you couldn't prove that it made it a different species. And also, they seem to be smart enough and intelligent enough to be able to go on all fours, and say that you found a pack that were walking upright, you saw 5 of them, and you managed to go round up a posse and go locate them again and say, here's where the 5 dogmen were. Well, if they knew that a big group of people was coming, I suspect that they would be able to just drop to all fours and, do, we're just dogs, and then there's no way to prove it, because by their behavior is the only way that that they're different.
Just curious, again, when I go to military battlefields and things of that nature, park rangers will come up to me and I'll say, oh, I saw your show, and they'll start telling me ghost stories and things, and they're a little bit, reluctant to come on camera and things of that nature. Have you spoke to park rangers about this phenomena, and have they related anything that you can tell us that may not be included in the book or off air, if you will?
I've heard from a few, conservation officers and DNR agents, and it's usually really off the books. It's nothing that they can admit professionally.
Right.
And I've talked to, like, Wisconsin has a well-known wolf expert, Adrian Whitevan. I've quoted him in the book. I've talked to people professors who've done and are conducting wolf studies on Isle Royale up in Lake Michigan. And people like that. I even have a local DNR officer who's let me bring him things like a giant pile of poop that turned out to be from a raccoon, and he'll look at these things. but I have yet to meet one that says, yeah, I know there are upright dog men that, I can state this as a professional. The ones who write me secretly don't want their identities known,
Right.
and they may have encountered them or seen them themselves, but there's no official admission that they exist.
Okay. But off air, if you will, have they told you that they do exist, and without giving
A
anything
couple,
away? Okay, that's fair.
a
That's all I
couple
wanted.
that
Yeah.
they've seen them, and again, they don't know exactly why they behave this way or what the cause of their condition is. And really, none of them think that they're werewolves. No, I haven't had
Understood.
any wardens call me and say, "Well, I saw this camper start sprouting fur and his muzzle elongate, and claws pop out." Nothing like that. But I have had some say that they saw what looked like wolves walking on their hind legs.
So no, a massive sightings during a full moon or anything like that has nothing to do with it. Fair
I
enough.
haven't found any well, there's one interesting correlation.
Sure. Go
Um,
ahead.
which is just that during full moons, there may be a slightly higher number, but I think that's because they're much more visible and humans passing by can see them more easily.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I'm kind of in agreement with you. I think this is a new species, or perhaps a very old species that's just been hidden away. And, I guess maybe with the decimation we did on the whole wolf population, maybe with good reason. Folks, we got to wrap up now. I want to thank Linda for joining us. Linda, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been
Thank
terrific.
you.
And I thoroughly enjoyed your book. Linda S. Godfrey has been our guest tonight. The book is called Real Wolfman, and perfect time to start reading a book like this, folks. Put your feet up, just relax, take the time, and read about some true encounters. And if you have some of your own, please contact me. I'll get you in touch with Linda directly without a problem. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. We'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. And you can read this book, folks, with the comforter pulled up. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
You're listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy